Yeah, we went ahead and did one this morning anyway. Everybody, all the one that we like to present quite often, actually, because it's so important. And tonight's training is about board governance. And I don't know, I think most of you guys have been here for the other mods before this one, correct? Mm-hmm. Okay. Great. This one just kind of follows in succession with those other ones. One of the things that we're going to talk about is board roles and responsibilities. I know that's something that we touch on quite a bit, but it's important nonetheless, especially from a legal standpoint, the different things that you as an organization are responsible for. So in the very first handout there, just kind of want to go over the ground shop rules. Or the workshop ground rules. One of these things is, as we're talking about governance anyway, talking about you guys running your board meetings efficiently and effectively. And that's one of the reasons that we always try to look at workshop ground rules, is because it's so important to be effective and to have everybody's voices heard and all the issues talked about and discussed at length with what you need to get done. And I think you guys are probably well familiar with the ones that we use here. And I'm sure out there where you guys work in your boards, your board meetings are probably a little bit less formal than a lot of the bigger organizations would be. So I think for the most part, most of all the organizations here pretty much have the same type basic setup. You have your officers, your president, vice president, secretary, treasurer, and so on and so forth. And everybody's got different roles and responsibilities for those particular positions. But with our organizations, we also know that you guys are pretty grassroots and you guys are all pretty much volunteers and you're spending your own time doing the things that you have to get done. So everybody wears different hats at different times. But in the GROW model, where we're at with this one right here, we're going to really concentrate more on the foundational and as we kind of go into that next phase, and we can get more in depth with that. But where we're at with this is pretty much the planning and effective communication and the leadership development, leadership management there. Because what we find a lot of times is the organizations themselves are put together because you guys obviously have a need in your community. You've recognized that particular need and you want to find a way to fix that need. So everybody, is working together and doing everything that you possibly can in order to make that happen. So those particular board roles that we're talking about, from president to secretary and treasurer to whatever, sometimes they just kind of blur the lines because you're doing so many other things too. We're going to kind of skip past some of this right here, but we're going to talk about the workshop objectives here for this one here. Identify one requirement that makes a nonprofit different than a for-profit organization. And that's pretty important. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But hopefully we'll explain why nonprofit organizations are answerable to the government of the state in which you operate, which most of the organizations here in the room are organized here in Oklahoma specifically, but we have a lot of at-large organizations that also are incorporated through their own respective states. We're going to identify one agency of the federal government to which nonprofits may need to report. Also identify the 3 criteria of duties used to judge the legal conduct of board of directors, and those are going to be important. We're going to really touch on those. And we're also going to explain the advantages of using parliamentary procedure to conduct board meetings. And parliamentary procedure, of course, Robert's Rules of Order, you guys are pretty familiar with that. But what is the role of a nonprofit organization? A nonprofit corporation, it's a special type of organization that's formed to carry out a purpose that is in the public or community interest. What does that really mean? It's like what we were talking about earlier. There's a particular need in the community that a group of people see and say, hey, we need to do something about that. And that need could be anything from we need some after-school programming to we need an elder nutrition program, or whatever that particular need may be. But primarily, that's the nonprofits. Really, that's their role to do what they can to make their own communities better. So what is the major difference between the kinds of things that a not-for-profit and a for-profit corporation can do as an organization? Anybody?
A nonprofit can do fundraising.
Right.
For-profit really can't.
Right, and that is, I think that's one of the areas where I think a lot of people get confused is about the fundraising and the raising of revenues, period. A nonprofit, just because it's a nonprofit, doesn't mean you can't make a profit. It simply means that the money that you do make needs to go back into the purpose of the organization. And just like a for-profit corporation, they're out to make money primarily, and they can distribute that to their shareholders. But the shareholders in a nonprofit organization is the public. So it's not an owned corporation like a for-profit organization would be. But being a nonprofit, you guys can also still sell goods and services. Everything from, let's see, does anybody in here do any services or sell any products or anything like that for their nonprofit? Right. So, yeah, selling different items like that. Concessions, when you have a community activity or an event or something like that, that's a good revenue stream, is to have concessions set up. I think there's a couple of organizations that do like a bingo night, and they make money that way. There's all sorts of different ways to do fundraising. What are some of the other activities you guys do for fundraising? Potlucks? Yeah, I was talking with one organization this morning. They do things like auctions. They have singings, different things like that, and they charge a couple dollars at the door, and those sorts of things. And the money goes to the organization to help pay those bills. But being a nonprofit doesn't mean you can't do that. It just means that the money needs to go back to the organization.
Well, we're just beginning our program, and so, these are things that we'll be looking at, ways in which we attended the fundraiser conference last Saturday.
Right.
And that was helpful. And so we'll be looking for ways,
Yeah.
that we can do things to put money back into our program.
Before that, we sell, we made some pincushions and stuff like that for the dogs and stuff,
Right.
And we sold in, we made flowers and sold in, but that was for the church.
Yeah, I
We've
mean,
been doing that all along, but it was for the church.
yeah, you can take things like that. You can sell things. You can do auctions and things like that too. There's a lot of different things that you guys can do. And we were talking about that because when you're looking at board governance, that's really one of the board of directors' responsibilities, is to make sure that the organization is ran effectively. And when you have a fundraiser, one of the things that I like to talk about is those particular fundraisers. There's fundraisers, then there's community activities. And then a lot of times what we find is we have a little bit of both at the same time. So how do you measure success when you're looking at activities versus, fundraisers? And, if you're doing a bake sale, for instance, and you have 10 people that volunteer to bake cookies and pies and cakes and stuff like that. Well, they've got some resources that they're going to have to use to do this. They're going to have to drive to the store to pick up the ingredients, so they are out of gas money, they're out of money for the ingredients, they're out of their time, so they could be putting, 8 to 10 hours each into it. And then if you look at that, you got 10 people that have put 10 hours in there, so there's 80 hours right there, and then you have the bake sale, and say you raise $200. 80 hours for $200, is that really effective? Was that really successful? Because when you look at it like that, it's really not so successful. But on the flip side of that is, did you really get some community members involved? Did you get people out? Were you able to get people together to visit, and were you successful like that? So there's a couple of different ways that you can measure that success, but as board members, that's your responsibility to look at. Are we being effective with the resources that we have? Because how many times are you going to be able to count on those particular volunteers when you see that they're not really getting much bang for the buck? So those are some of the things that we have to look at, especially when we do the the fundraisers and stuff, because we really want them to be successful. We want to be able to pay the bills and keep the lights on. So. And we kind of talked about this, some people are kind of confused about that nonprofit status, so I think we've pretty much determined, yeah, we can go out and we can make money for the organization, because otherwise, how are we going to have our programs and services? We've got to be able to fund those. So does everyone have to be paid, or does everyone that works there, they have to be unpaid volunteers? Now, we have a lot of organizations that are larger, of course, like United Way, Goodwill, for instance, Red Cross. They have paid staff. They're nonprofit organizations. So just because you're a nonprofit doesn't mean you can't have paid staff. But if you have paid staff, you're looking at a pretty sizable budget. And I don't think many of our organizations really enjoy that large of a budget. But it's a nice goal to shoot for, to be able to have some paid staff. Because you have paid staff, it means you have somebody that's really accountable, right? But guess what? As as directors for your boards, you guys are accountable anyway, even though you're not getting paid. But you may not get paid monetarily, but there's a lot of other rewards behind it. And we kind of talked about that already. All excess revenue after expenses, your profits must be dedicated towards achieving the purposes of the organization. Rules that nonprofits must follow. Nonprofits are regulated by governments of individual states, but just like Oklahoma, there's certain rules and restrictions that you guys have to do. When you guys first incorporated, you incorporated through the state of Oklahoma as a domestic nonprofit. It's a real simple process, but at the same time, once that process is over with, there's reporting requirements every year, and that you are required to do. Whether you make, $5 for that year, or $5,000 or $50,000, you still have to report to the state of Oklahoma. And I think the income tax reporting for the state of Oklahoma is very similar to that of the IRS. It's if you don't make more than a certain amount of money, it's just a simple form, and you click the little box that says, no, we did not make more than that amount, and here's our name and address and all that good stuff. Because basically the state wants to know that you're still in existence and you're still working. And that's why those requirements are there. I think that's the 512E as far as the income requirements are for the state. But there is, a few years ago, there was also the other form that they require nonprofits to fill out every year if you make more than, I think, $10,000 a year. And once again, it's just one of those things where they can kind of control, how many nonprofits are out there and what they're doing, and make sure that they are legitimate organizations. But also, not just state requirements, but you guys also, I think everybody here has received the COTA grant. Well, with that COTA grant, you also enter into a contract with the CCO office. And that contract stipulates that you guys are required to fill out those monthly reports. Those good old fun monthly reports that everybody loves so much. You know, so every contract that you enter into as a board, you guys are liable for. And, you know, you're required to meet those obligations. The federal stuff. Now, just because you are an organization, a nonprofit organization, doesn't automatically give you exempt organization status with the IRS. I think most of the people in the room, with the exception of a few, have 501c3s currently, right? Lorraine, Cherokee Elders is a 501. Telt is a 501, correct? And I believe Brushy has their 501 too. But that 501 process, you know, it's kind of a lengthy application and it's a long process, but it's very beneficial to your board. It's the 1023 form, and really the most difficult part about that is the financial data that has to go into it, because you're looking at budget projections. It's much easier to do the younger the organization is, because you don't really have a whole lot of financial baggage that you have to account for. So if that is something that you want to look at, that's definitely one thing that you need to keep in mind. The younger you are as an organization, the easier it is to get that stuff done. But the federal reporting requirements for that are fairly simple. If you don't make more than $50,000 a year, or average that over a 3-year period, it's just a simple postcard for your organization, and the postcard just says your name, address, your EIN number, and that you did not make above that amount. So, and then you can do it online, and it takes about 5 minutes, literally. I think Tammy has helped most of the organizations do those over the past. So, starting a nonprofit, one of the things that we always like to look at, even with our older organizations that have been around for a while, is that first one, that focus on mission, that purpose, because that's so important. You don't just want to gather up some folks and say, hey, let's start a nonprofit. Well, what are we going to do? You know, well, you probably already have something in mind that you see needs to be fixed. And it could be as simple as needing a place to meet. Like Brushy just finished their community building just past year. And that's one of the things that they really saw that they needed in their community, was a nice place to meet and to gather and to do things. And now that they have that, they've got that done. And so now their new mission, their purpose is to use it. So they're going to be using it for all sorts of different things. Newt, what kind of activities are you guys planning now? Youth craft? Yeah. Right. You know, that's one of the things that a lot of our local communities need when you're talking about a place to meet is and that rent helps you be able to keep the lights on. But you know, a lot of times there's not a local place large enough to hold family reunions or birthday parties or you know, even wedding receptions. You know, things like that. People in the community can use something like that. And it's a very large building. It's nice. It's got kitchen utilities there. I mean, it's really nice, and people can do just about anything out there that you can imagine as far as gathering. Not a lot of grass on the front part yet, though, is there?
Yeah.
Is it?
They started it, and the grass is still growing.
So the grass is coming in good, huh? Good.
Yeah. Rubber they put around it, we lost two trucks out of it.
Yeah, well, we've had a pretty good winter here in Oklahoma. And so far, we've enjoyed some pretty decent spring, summertime weather, too. We haven't hit those triple digits yet. But the next thing, learn about needs and the proposed remedies. That's when we're talking about that focus on the mission. As when you're talking about the board of directors and the governance part of that, you really want to check with your community to see what's going on. Keep your hand on the pulse, basically, of the community and see what their needs are, what they perceive the needs are, especially for an organization that has been around for a little while now. It's good to kind of hold up and take stock and, hey, where are we at right now? And that's a good idea to start talking with the community, especially if you see that you're not getting enough volunteers out for your activities and things, or if the community's not getting as involved as you think they should be. Because a lot of times I think we kind of get stuck in a rut. We have certain activities that are our go-to activities, and that's what we do every month. But how many times do we look at that and say, well, maybe we need to do something different to get more people involved. What can we do to this to enhance that? So that's some of the things that we can take a look at. But make a preliminary written plan. That's important because if we have a plan, we can make some goals. And once we make some goals, we can actually look at it. Once we put that plan into place and start working on it, we can actually look at that and evaluate it. And also, if we have a plan, that number 4 there, recruit interested people and get feedback on that plan. Before we ever even put that plan into motion, that's when we can start visiting with other community folks and say, hey, this is what we plan on doing, and this is how we plan on doing it. What do you think? And start getting some feedback, because quite honestly, if you present a plan to them that none of them are really catching on and they don't really think it's going to work, you think you're going to get them out as volunteers? Probably not. So you really want to have a plan. You want to take a look at that plan. You want to evaluate that plan. You want to get input. And then once you have that input and you have something in mind that looks like it's going to be successful, then you can move forward. And then prepare to represent the organization. That's so important because I know we've talked about that mission, that purpose, and I know most of you guys have a mission statement and a vision statement. How many of you don't have a mission and vision statement for your organizations now? I think so. Everybody does have something like that in mind. Well, in a situation like this, how many of y'all could be on the spot, give me a 5-minute presentation on what your mission is for your organization, and sell me if I was a potential funder? That's important, because as a board director, you really should be so familiar with that mission and your purpose that if you were just walking down the street and you happen to run into somebody that says, hey, how you guys doing, with that organization, you should be able to say, man, we were doing fantastic, but we could really, we could be doing a lot better because this is our plan, this is our mission, this is our vision, where we want to take this, but we could really use your help. And ask. The ask is so important, but you need to be able to present that mission to them. And sometimes you only have a couple of minutes. But as a director for your board, hey, that's your responsibility. And when you're talking about governance, that's really what the board's there to do, is to perpetuate that mission and to keep that going and make it successful. So let's look at the particular role of the board of directors. Let me just kind of go around the room. Let me get what your all's role, whether or not you're a president, secretary, treasurer, both, or just a board member, or what have you. Maybe not even a board member, just a community member, concerned community member. So Lynette, what is your position currently?
I'm vice president.
Vice president. So and Lorraine,
I'm the secretary.
You're sec-
of the elders and board member of Rocky Mountain.
okay, yeah. Yeah, we have some people that sit on several different boards. What about you guys?
Vice President, Moita.
Okay, so you're all also a VP?
Yes.
What about
I
you?
was treasurer of the Washington County too, but you got part of it.
Did you?
I'm not currently on the board.
Okay, okay. But you're concerned community members, and that's important. That's an important role. What are some of the other roles that you guys have on the current boards? You're also vice president? President? Treasurer? So we've got every office basically represented here tonight. So we're going to take a look at those different roles that you guys currently have. Well, let's back up a second. Well, this is overall the board's responsibilities here to direct the mission of the organization. As board members, it doesn't matter what your seat is. That's pretty much your primary. Directing that mission that's what you guys are all about. Protect the organization's resources. And what does protect the organization's resources really mean?
Don't embezzle.
There you go. That's right. Everybody is accountable for that, so that's very important. Don't embezzle. Good lesson. But protecting those resources means spending your money wisely, because I know if you guys are anything like me, you never have enough, for everything that you want to do. So resources are very limited.
You need to protect the equipment too that you have.
Absolutely.
The building itself.
Protect all of your resources, your assets, taking care of your building, regular maintenance. It's costly when you have a building. It costs you money to keep those lights on, but even if the lights weren't on, you didn't have any electricity there, in order to keep that building in usable condition, you're going to have to put some work into it. And it costs money to do that. So you really want to protect all those assets. Guide and support the organization's operations and personnel. I know we don't have any paid staff, but sometimes we do have volunteers that come in and work. It's important work that they're doing, and as a board member, you want to make sure that they understand that they're valuable team members in your organization. So you want to definitely look out for those folks. Duty of care. What does that really mean? Careful, prudent, attending meetings, and being informed. As board members, that's one of your primary roles, is to always be informed of what's going on. And that's not just internal, but also external, because there's a lot of external factors that can affect your organization. For instance, the COTA grant comes out every year. Does you guys remember what month that usually rolls out? October, right?
The form, the funds go out probably in February.
Yeah, and the funds get released usually a month or two or so thereafter. But yeah, that's really important, is to know what's going on, not just with your organization, how well you're functioning and how effective you are, but also externally. What's going on out there that is going to have an effect on your organization. If there's a new grant out there, for instance, that can really help fulfill that mission, you guys want to be in on it from the very beginning, because if it's a very lengthy grant and you inform the board members about it, 2 days before it's due, I doubt seriously that you're going to be able to get that done in time. Now, I know a few of you guys have probably worked on the COTA grant the night before. I ain't gonna mention any names. Lorraine? No, I'm just kidding. Even the COTA grant it's kind of lengthy, and it requires a little bit of time and effort to go into that, to get that. But you want to make sure that you guys are aware of what's going on. And a lot of you folks, I know I talk to on a regular basis, and so does the staff. Everybody's networking quite well, and that's one of the really important things that we want to get out of these meetings like this, is we want people to know who the other folks are, that you guys may be facing the same thing that or they may be facing the same thing that you guys are currently now, and they've been successful at overcoming an obstacle in the way. So these networking type deals like this are very valuable. And that's when you're talking about duty of care, attending trainings like this, that's important. That's right up there. Duty of loyalty, trustworthy, giving undivided allegiance to the organizations. And like she said a while ago, hey, don't embezzle. Duty of loyalty to the organization. it's so important when we talk about our organization in public. You guys are the mouthpiece for that organization. You are the marketing branch for your organization. And how well you present information in public is very important. So it's something to keep in mind when you're talking to other folks about it. And if you're talking to a potential funder and you're talking a lot of negative things about, well, they just don't do this right, and I just don't like the way they're doing this and stuff like that. Do you think that funder is going to want to fund that organization? So when you're talking about duty of loyalty, your loyalty is to that organization, and you want to present a positive image for that organization. Duty of obedience, committed and faithful to the mission, being sure the organization obeys laws, keeps careful records, and files required reports. Once again, even the reports for CAUTA have to be done monthly. And then if you have multiple grants out there, there's a lot of different reporting requirements that come along with those. And fraud, that's one of the things we're talking about just now. Don't embezzle. Fraud. Have good oversight of fundraising activities by the board members. When you guys do fundraisers currently and you have different revenues coming in and stuff, do you have a couple of people count that, and verify the funds that come in? It's usually a good idea to have a couple of people count that. That way you've got some verification, and it protects your people too, because if you had one person that was doing the counting and turned it in, then somebody could say, well, I think that they pocketed 20 bucks of that. But if you got a couple of people there, you got a witness, and you want good open transparency anyway, so it's always a good idea to have backup. Theft and self-dealing are pretty self-explanatory. As board members, you guys do have a big responsibility to your organization. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this conflict of interest. I think most of our organizations from their bylaws have a good conflict of interest statement. That is one of the things that the IRS really focuses on when you're looking to get your 501c3. A good, strong conflict of interest, because let's face it, folks, here we have very small community organizations in small communities, and when you need work done, a lot of times it's, hey, let's get old Bob down the street, my brother-in-law, he's real good at this, so let's just hire him to build this new building for us. And you got a $100,000 check, and all of a sudden you want to give it to your brother-in-law or your brother or your cousin or somebody like that. Well, it's not going to look too good in the community, is it? So a good conflict of interest statement will avoid any of those potential problems like that. Let's look at a definition. A conflict of interest is an actual or perceived interest by someone in an action that results in personal gain. So when we're talking about old brother-in-law Bob over here or something like that, one of the things that as a community member may say is, well, they gave that to old Bob down there, and I know that's his brother-in-law, and I think they overpaid him. I think somebody's getting kickbacks. That's why we have a bidding process. At the Nation, when we have work to be done, we always, and whenever there's, even with our organizations that we fund for community work projects, we want you guys to go out and solicit bids. That way it makes it a very fair process. And then we'll take a little bit more in-depth look at conflict of interest, because it's so important. The different ways to handle that conflict of interest. A code of ethics statement. A lot of our organizations don't have a code of ethics statement, but a lot of businesses do actually use these. When you actually get hired in, or you work for a larger organization, they may have an ethics statement that basically would read, this is what I agree to act like, in a very professional manner, and not put the company at jeopardy, and so on and so forth, and sign off on that. But I know a lot of our organizations don't really use a code of ethics, but the thing that you do have to, by law, is have a good conflict of interest statement in your bylaws. So how do we avoid potential problems with conflict of interest? The first one, recuse yourself. If you're a board member and you know that we're having some work done on the building, And we're going to put this out for bid, but one of the people that's bidding on it is a brother-in-law or a cousin or a friend of the family or what have you. If you're sitting on that committee that is voting on whether or not to use this particular person, you may want to recuse yourself and say, hey, look, this is my brother-in-law, this is my brother, this is my sister, whatever, and say, I'm not going to get involved in that decision-making process, so I'm not going to vote on any of that, and just recuse yourself simply from that. And you can remove yourself from that particular committee that may be looking at that. Third-party evaluations. I know that, for instance, when we have grants that come in from back when we were Compassion Capital, we had very small staff, and we would, when the grants would come in, we would take the applications. Since we worked so closely with the community organizations, we had a lot of friends and family that worked in all these organizations. We didn't want to be the ones deciding whether or not to fund the organizations and how much they're going to get funding. So what we would do to avoid any potential problem with that was to send these grants out to be read by professional grant writers and readers that did not have a dog in the hunt, basically. So we avoided that conflict of interest by having a third party do those evaluations for us. And that's something you guys can certainly do there. Governance, and that's what we're really talking about tonight on all these different things, is the governance of your board. That's really how you operate. The management, supervising people who carry out the day-to-day operations of the organization, that's you guys really. You don't have any staff. You guys are doing everything. We talked about that earlier. Everybody's wearing different hats. Just because you're a vice president or a secretary or board member, that doesn't mean that's your only role that you guys are playing. You're doing everything. Sometimes you're the chief bottle washer. You know, you may be cooking, you may be serving, you may be doing a little bit of everything. So it's pretty important work, no matter what we're doing. Some of the concerns that we look at when we do take on the responsibility of sitting on a board. You've got some legal and financial duties. So it's your responsibility, your personal responsibility to find out what those are. If you're sitting on a board of directors and one of your people says, hey, I just wrote for a grant and we got this grant and now we're going to have $150,000, and you knew nothing about it, well, that was your responsibility to begin with. Why were they allowed to do that in the name of the board and you not know about that? So there's some legal and financial duties there that everybody's responsible for. Every penny that comes into your organization as a board member, you guys need to know about it. Every penny that goes out as a board member, you guys need to know about it. Every activity that is planned as a board member, you guys need to know about it. You got to be informed. Oversight of the organizations and its management. And that's why, you guys as a board, it's your responsibility to oversee all the activities. And you want to make sure that those activities are really supporting your mission. Everything comes back around to your mission. If you're doing some activities and stuff and it doesn't really seem to support that, well, it's your responsibility to bring that up and say, well, guys, this is our mission here and I think we're losing focus. So as a board member, you're going to have to want to try to let everybody know, this is our focus, this is our mission, this is our vision, and it doesn't really seem to be aligning. So we need to maybe veer off of that and get back on track. Fundraising concerns, that's everybody's concern, not just the board members, but we've got some other just community members here too. Well, you know what? That nonprofit and that organization belongs to them too. They have a valid interest in that and they want to see you be successful. So everybody has a stake in this. So when you're looking at fundraising concerns, and that's where your volunteers come from, is your community. Just because you're the board of directors doesn't mean that you're the only ones that can do any work. You guys have to try to go out and get other people involved. It can't run on itself. But, and then communication and interaction with the community. How many of you guys do a newsletter right now? A couple of different organizations. That's good. That's better than none. Because quite honestly, those newsletters are important in your community because, it's spreading the word. It's getting people out there understanding and knowing what's going on with your organization and why you're there. But that communication doesn't just stop with a newsletter. I mean, you've got social media now that is just everywhere. Facebook. How many of you guys use Facebook for your organizations? A few anyway. How many people use Facebook for personal stuff? A few more. Well, if you can use it for your personal stuff, you can use it for an organization. And you can be quite effective in your fundraising. You can be quite effective in your communication too. Then evaluation of its own and the organization's efficiency and effectiveness. That's one of the most important things as a board member. And we were talking about this earlier with the fundraising efforts. To be effective, to be efficient, you guys want to take a look at all those activities that are going into this and making sure that, hey, we're on track, we're doing well with it, we could be doing better, and, try to figure out ways that you can do better. Because quite honestly, if you're putting a lot of time and effort into it for very little return, you're going to get burnt out pretty quick. So you really want to try to get the biggest bang for your buck, so to speak. Officers of the board, and we've looked at some of that, the president or chairperson, vice president, secretary and treasurer. These are pretty much your officers that the state says, hey, you need to have, and the federal government too. But we've also got other titles and stuff too. We've got a lot of committee chairs. But most of the time, if you do have a committee, the committees that we've seen are things like fundraising committees or activity committees or something like that. You still want a board member to chair those. Because the board is the one that is legally responsible for your organization anyway. So you always want a board member to chair any of those committees. But you do want to get the other community folks involved. If somebody happens to be really good at setting up softball tournaments, just because they're not on the board doesn't mean you can't use them. Hey, let's get them involved. Horseshoe pitching tournaments, same thing. Whatever it is, if it's fishing tournaments, if you know somebody in your community that knows how to do these sorts of things, there's an opportunity to get them involved and also to raise money for your organization to further your efforts toward your mission and goal. So the characteristics of a good board. You're looking at the big picture. Once again, it kind of revolves right back to that mission statement. What purpose do you guys have for existing in the first place? Why are you there? A keen sense of priorities. That's leadership. Sometimes as a board member, you may have to say, well, that is not going to work toward furthering our mission here. That's just kind of one of those things that's, it's kind of borderline for us. So let's take a look at something else because we really need to keep focus on what it is that you're trying to do. Maybe the organization, maybe the purpose or the mission is to perpetuate the Cherokee language and to keep that alive and keep that going and growing. So maybe that purpose is that solely for the organization. So they're going to want to do activities and things that still bring that mission back into focus. The mission could be to feed the hungry in the neighborhood or in the community. There could be elders that just need a good nutritional meal. And that could be the mission statement. So whatever that is, you want to make sure as a board member that you're focusing on those missions. Recognize the value of growth opportunities. Just because you're focused on that particular mission doesn't mean that you can't see what other opportunities are out there in order to enhance that. I know some of our organizations have elder nutrition programs, but they're also doing other things too, like activities to get people up and moving and just visiting with other folks. I know one group in particular that I like to brag on is the Oak Senior Citizens. They just recently had a Wii bowling tournament, and it's just really neat to see so many folks that come out to do that. You know, it takes a while to do those things and put those things on, but it's really kind of neat. So it's not just about the nutrition program, it's about getting people involved and people knowing what's going on in the community. See, how are we doing on time? Okay. We got about another 5 or 6 minutes and we'll take a break. Thinks before it acts, values teamwork, constantly evaluates itself and keeps improving. That's what we're doing. We want to make it better. We want to keep moving right ahead and making sure that all your needs are met as the organization. I want to make sure that you've got enough money in the bank account to pay the light bill, but what happens if an air conditioner goes out? You have enough money to cover that from those emergency situations? It seems like you never do, because emergencies happen to an organization just like they do at home. And whenever it hits, and there's not a whole lot you can do about it but just get it fixed. So it's good to have contingency plans and to have those emergency backups. Able to listen, analyze carefully, think creatively, and work well with others. I love that last one, work well with others. That's probably one of the most important things when you're working on a board like this, because everybody are volunteers. Everybody's volunteers here. So we want to be able to work well with others, have a good chemistry there, but be agreeable when you can be agreeable. Willing to commit to serving the organization faithfully, committed to developing new skills and knowledge in order to serve the needs of the board, and dedicated to improving personal characteristics. I don't know if you guys can see that little cartoon there or not, two guys standing on their hands, but it reads, "It's a good thing to learn, I guess. The board expects us to develop new skills all the time." Well, that's one of the things with CATA that we hope that happens with these types of trainings. It's not just the information that we present, but it's the networking opportunities that we have with you guys too, so that you guys can share that knowledge with each other. We're going to skip that code of ethics part. Board meetings. I'll tell you what, before we jump into board meetings, why don't we take about a 5-minute break, get you a drink of water or what have you, and we'll kick it right back up in 5 minutes time. Board meetings, that's where we're going to pick up at. We're talking about governance once again. Few suggestions on board meetings. Board meetings are a forum for discussion and decision-making, so everybody should be there. I've gone to several board meetings and over time, and sometimes it's really aggravating when you got a board that can't ever take care of business because you don't have a quorum. So that's one of the things that's really important as a board member, showing up, being there. You're obviously important to that organization, so it's pretty important for you to be there. Your meetings should be pretty organized and follow the agenda. This here is talking about 90 minutes long. It should never be more than 90 minutes long. And quite honestly, you should be able to get out of a board meeting within an hour's time if you're pretty efficient and effective, because there's not a whole lot of big business that are taking place at the local level here where we're at. Meetings generally tend to last longer when things are bogged down and you go off track. Like the minutes of the meetings. I've been to some board meetings here lately where the board has actually stopped, taken about 10, 15, 20 minutes even to read the minutes from the previous board meeting. Quite honestly, you guys should be able to approve those things in less than a couple of minutes' time and move on. Because when that board meeting happens, within a few days' time, the secretary or whoever you have designated to be taking those minutes for the meetings should be able to have those typed up and ready for the board and be able to disseminate those minutes out to the board at that time, probably within a week anyway.
We have our minutes typed out, laying in front of our board members, and our treasury report both to read before the meeting starts. And when it comes to approval of minutes, like I said, has everybody read it? Has everybody approved it?
Right.
It's 5 minutes like it.
Yep, because really the only thing that you're going to do to the minutes are amend them if something that didn't get in there that you thought was important. You may want to make a change and offer that change. But those are one of those concession items, that comes up. The board, it's your responsibility to have those minutes before you get to that board meeting and know what's there so you can approve those and move on to the real business. That whole process of opening your board meeting up, an invocation, a prayer, whatever you guys do your roll call and do your concessions there, your approval of the board minutes, and all that stuff. That can take less than 10 minutes. Then you can move on to the rest of the meeting and get to the new business and the business at hand. Every meeting should be facilitated by the chairperson, who should know the basics of conducting a meeting. We've talked about parliamentary procedure, and that's really where all this comes from. I think there's a few organizations that even still have a sergeant at arms. That's one of those things. This all comes, Robert's Rules of Order comes from parliamentary procedure, and parliamentary procedure comes from Parliament. So, you have all these processes in place for a reason, and that's really to protect yourselves. When you're looking at facilitating that meeting, the chairperson basically makes sure that the meeting is, you're following the agenda, you're staying on task, and nothing gets out of order. A lot of times what really gets people burned out on going to board meetings is those discussions that take an hour long, and then next thing you know, your board meeting that started at 6:30, it's now 9 o'clock and you're still not done. How many people want to keep coming back for that? Those board meetings, let's take care of business and let's move forward and let's get on to the mission of the organization. The board meetings are they're there for that. That's to take care of business. It's not to visit. It's not to do anything else other than take care of business. You can visit before, you can visit after. But let's take care of business when the time is allotted for that. It makes it much more enjoyable. Ground rules. We talked about ground rules when we started our meetings here. We usually like different ground rules and stuff, and that's kind of the reason I just kind of skimmed over them at the front. When we talk about ground rules for meetings, like cell phones, for instance, it's just a respectful thing. Put them on vibrate or silent or what have you, and if they go off, you can step out and take your call. But it's not interrupting everything else. Same thing with your board meetings or any other type of meeting that you're attending. The tribal council, that's one of the things that they ask you to do when you come in, turn your phones off. So as not to interrupt. But the chairperson, that facilitates that meeting, you want it to be a really easy meeting to follow. And if you got visitors there that's there to, just to watch what's going on and to visit with the board and what have you, it makes it much more pleasant for them to be there if it's not a discussion and argument for 2 hours. You guys really know what your business is, you know what you need to take care of, so you can get to that new business pretty quickly and get things taken care of. So those ground rules are really important to facilitate a good, efficient meeting. The parliamentary procedures, some of the advantages to using parliamentary procedure, it provides a fair and orderly process for conducting discussions and making decisions. And it's based on ideals that everyone has a right to speak and be heard. I know some organizations allow a time for public comment. Yes, ma'am. Oh, okay. Yep. And that's what a lot of organizations do when they do have public comment. It may be limited to 3 minutes or 5 minutes or what have you, but at the end of that time, you're done. Next one, and that just keeps everything flowing well. And now, just because you allow public comment does not mean that you have to address that concern for that community person. Because really you're there for the business at hand. But to hear them and to understand what their issues are, that's pretty important as board members. So it's a lot of times a good idea, but it's also a good idea to make sure that you limit that amount of time and also limit the things that they can do. Like, for instance, you don't want them to be able to call anybody out by name and say that, slander them or say bad things about them. You want positive comments and keep moving forward with that.
And you put a limit on how many people can do it?
Yes. Yep. I've seen school boards, for instance, allow a certain amount of time and only certain slots. And it's a first come, first serve. You get there early, you sign in, and you may get a spot. And after 5 people, it's cut off, But that's entirely up to you guys, how you want to do that. But it also allows for everyone should be able to talk and deal with one subject at a time. So if you're following that agenda, you're not bouncing around all over the place and you're not confusing anybody with the subject at hand. You want to make sure that you're following that agenda and everybody is very aware of what the importance of that particular item is. Board meeting process features recognition from the chair. When you're at a board meeting and you're chairing this, you don't want everybody trying to talk at once. So you want to keep order in there. And I've seen some board meetings that are very efficient. And if you watch tribal council, and especially the committees and stuff, they will signal the chairperson that they have a question or comment. And as he goes through whoever's going to be next, he'll call on them and say, okay, I think this person here had a comment or had a question, and allow them time to speak and get clarification on the issues. Out of order, that's simply when somebody's speaking, before the chair has indicated it's their turn. So you want to facilitate that, if somebody's really out of order. And this is where the sergeant of arms that we talked about earlier came into play. Sergeant of arms, it was their responsibility to keep order during the board meetings. And they may be called on to have the person stop. And sometimes if it continues on, they may even have to eject somebody. I don't think we've ever had a situation that serious, but that's pretty important, whoever is facilitating that meeting, to keep order. Voting, voice votes, show of hands, rising vote. stand up or sit down vote type deal. But you guys do want to make sure that your votes are recorded. You're a nonprofit organization and you're very public. And you want to make sure that people know that you have voted and how you voted on particular issues, especially the really important ones. This is political season right now, and Tuesday, I think we had some votes going on today. Did everybody go out and vote? Exercise that right? Great. But yeah, and when you see the campaigns on TV, you see people saying, well, this is the way that they voted, or this is the way that they voted. Well, that tells people, really, you represent the community. So it tells people how you look at the different issues and stuff that the organization has. So voting is pretty important stuff. Motions, the main method for discussion and decision making. A motion is a brief statement focused on one topic. And we do that a lot. I move to do whatever. I move to approve the previous board minutes, and then once somebody makes that motion, the next step is somebody's going to second it. If you don't get a second, it dies there. But if you get a second, what comes next? Well, after you get a second, discussion, right? Discussion, okay? And then that's where you guys can vet out the situation and make sure that you understand exactly what it is that you're going to be voting on. Okay, and then once you understand that and the chairperson closes the discussion, he says, okay, well, we've heard all the discussion now, and he would, or she would restate what that motion was and then ask for a vote. Pretty simple stuff.
At that time, if you want a verbal or name vote, can board member ask for that?
Sure. Yeah, most of our boards are not large boards, and it's not going to take more than a minute or two for that to happen. Most of the time, I've seen a lot of our boards, though, seem to find consensus pretty quickly. And consensus is everybody for it and nobody against,
The problem I saw in some of our board meetings was that they call a vote and yay or nay.
Right.
Half the people or 5 people says yay, the rest of them say nothing. You don't know how to vote.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, and this is pretty important to me, so I said, can we have a roll call vote?
Yep.
I can see each person how they vote.
Exactly.
That way I know whether they're for it or they're against it or they don't care
Right.
or whatever.
Yeah, because as a board member, it's your responsibility to vote for or against or abstain due to possibly a conflict of interest. But still, you have a responsibility, and just sit there and do nothing. It's you're not really fulfilling your role, so to speak. So important. And yes, I mean, the secretary or whoever is actually keeping the records and stuff, if they're using some form to keep their minutes on, they can make it really quick. Because if you've got 5 board members or 7 board members, and you ask for a vote, and you got their names there on yes or no, you can put a Y or an N right beside their name on that little template already spelled out for you, and it's done in 15 seconds. So it doesn't really kill any more time than what's necessary. So yeah, absolutely.
It doesn't matter if you call for an opposing vote, and nobody responds, then silence is consent.
Right.
They have the opportunity to,
Right.
they would stay.
Yep.
You still don't know how that person, individual, even though they say yes or no, you don't care. To me, I still want to know what he thinks, or.
Sure.
Okay, yes, I want to, or no, I don't want to, or I abstain. But I know that particular person or that particular group of people, let me know whether to pursue it or
Yep.
not to pursue it.
Yep. And if they abstain very often, you really need to question why they're there.
Right.
Incidental motions simply provides for ways of dealing with the meeting as a whole or a variety of problems that may come up. You know, you may need to take a break or something like that, and you can actually move to do that, so you can, you know, take a refreshment break or what have you, and then come back to it in a few minutes. So, but those are just kind of incidental motions that can happen. But the chair can make a big difference in how effective board meetings are. You know, general meetings, basically, you're going to find out whether or not you have a quorum right off the bat. You can't really open the meeting without a quorum, or you can't conduct business without a quorum anyway. Keeping to the agenda and keep things moving along so that, hey, the board's not bored. That's really important. Like I said, you know, you can get people burned out really quickly if you're having these 2 and 3 hour long board meetings to discuss a couple of items that really should have been a yay or nay. The chair's duties during discussion and debate. Really, the president, even though it's the top of the hierarchy, is one of the least powerful in a certain sense. But the president usually doesn't have a vote. They need to remain objective for the discussion. And then if they need to break a tie, then the president can vote, generally speaking. Because, like I said, that the president or the chairperson needs to remain objective during this whole debate and be able to facilitate this meeting. And if you're subjective and you're trying to sway people as the president or the chairperson, you know, with your seat and your authority, you're not really remaining objective like you should be. In the president's role too, a lot of times we do have some shy folks that are sitting on boards for the first time, and they may not know exactly what those protocols are and how to voice opinions and things like that, and how to really get people involved, especially with new board members coming on. Well, as a president or whoever's chairing that's kind of your responsibility to make sure that every one of your board members understands what the situation is, and get what their opinion is. You know, especially on really important items. But their role is also to keep order, gently guide and focus the debate to keep the speakers on topic. They were asking this morning about, well, how do you politely shut somebody down that shouldn't be speaking? Well, you can be as polite as you can. Sometimes it just doesn't work. But the bottom line is, you're there to take care of business, and you need to make sure that people understand that. You know, you can let them know, hey, look, we understand that you're concerned with this, but right now we have to maintain our focus on what's on the agenda. You know, and if you'd like to visit with us after the board meeting or before or whatever, please feel free to do that. But right now we need to stick to this. So you can just kind of refocus them back over to where you need to be. Restate motions before vote, then conduct a vote and announce the result. That's one of the things that we were just talking about that's very important as the president's role, or whoever's chairing the meeting. You need to always restate what that motion is so that to make sure that, number one, your secretary or whoever's taking the notes has that down properly. And that then, whenever you're taking the vote, everybody knows exactly what it is that they're voting on. So you need to restate that and be really clear about that. Duties of the vice president. I know we got some vice presidents in here. The biggest duty of the vice president, take over when the president's not there. So you're basically the succession plan. You're next in line. Being a voting member and suggest good ideas to oversee any and all committees. It is a good idea that the vice president oversee committees. Whether or not you have fundraising committees, activity committees, you know, whatever these committees are, it's always a good idea to have, that's a vice president's role. But whether or not it's vice president or not, one of the board directors needs to be chairing those committees, because at the end of the day, the board is what's responsible. They're the ones liable for any decisions made. So, but like we talked about earlier, it may not just be those simple things there that the vice president has to do. You may be also the cook, for the fundraisers. You may be working the concession stand and taking money at whatever. You're going to be wearing a lot of different hats. Duties of the secretary, making a record of each board meeting. I think we've got a few secretaries in here too. I think that's one of the most important roles, because every document that you make and create is a legal form it's a legal document. It can be used in court. But it's your duty, it's your responsibility to keep good records of everything that's going on, whether it's correspondence with grantors, funders, or what have you. As a secretary, it's your responsibility to keep record of all this sort of stuff. Preparing many meeting minutes and other documents and making them available to the board for each meeting. As soon as that meeting is over, you want to make sure that you have your notes together and go ahead and type those up. But now, taking minutes at board meetings too, you don't need to be taking down all the little discussion items. The main things that you need to be recording are any major decisions. Anything that is voted on, you need to have a good record of it. All that little stuff in between, all the talk and the discussion and stuff like that, that's not really what's important that you need to be recording. But any major decisions that board takes, any actions that board takes, you need to make sure that you've got a good, clear, concise record of that. Filing or storing each record in an easily accessible place. It's a good idea to have backup, storage of whatever it is. If you're keeping digital copies, make sure that you've got it backed up, maybe an external hard drive, or there's a number of different resources of software out there where you can store stuff. Like I use Dropbox, for instance. When I'm sharing music files, it could be different tracks. I do a lot of music recording and stuff. And when I'm recording particular tracks, I may be working with a friend in Nashville or somebody in Tennessee, anywhere, or Seattle. And we use Dropbox, and it's simply just a software that it's basically like cloud-based stuff. I mean, you can put these files in there, and it's saved out there. If something happens to your hard drive and it crashes, you can always go to it from any other terminal, any other location, and retrieve that information. So it's a good idea to always have backups, especially when you're talking about a digital world, because how many times have our laptops, our good old PCs failed us? We can't always have Macs, but when we see Chris laughing. Let's see here. A basic agenda. I know most of you guys are pretty good with your agendas, but this one here, these are basically the steps in order. Call the meeting to order, an opening ceremony or invocation, prayer, what have you, before you start that. Roll call, and that's basically where you're going to establish a quorum or not. And if you don't have a quorum, you can't conduct business. The reading of the minutes, and that really should be approval of the minutes instead of just reading of the minutes, because quite honestly, you guys should have already read them. The only thing you need to do there is make an amendment, if you need to change them or what have you, and then approve them or not. Officers' reports. How many of you guys utilize officers' reports? You guys? A couple. Yeah, we like to encourage that, because if you have a committee, maybe it's an activity committee, you want to hear from them. You want to hear what's going on. You want that documented. So it's a good idea to hear from your committees. Then you can you can accept committee reports. As such, you can even make motions to do so. It's not necessarily one of those consent items. Some unfinished business. And really, those are things that may have been tabled or something. But new business, this is what you're here for, to take care of things that need to be taken care of. Appointing committees, good of the order. Well, appointing committees, a lot of times our committees are basically standing committees. They're there. Now, when you have a standing committee, there's a difference between a standing committee and an ad hoc committee. I'll talk about that in a minute, because a standing committee is it is an activity committee, and it's one that you have all the time. Well, the important thing to note is when a committee has a meeting like that, a standing committee, by law, you're also supposed to be using an agenda and keeping minutes to those meetings. That's really important to note. But now, if it's an ad hoc committee, that's, say it's going to be a horseshoe pitching tournament going on, and you have a committee for that, and it's just a one-time thing, and you're done. You don't necessarily have to take notes for that and keep minutes for that meeting. But if it is a standing committee, you are required to be keeping minutes to that and presented to the board, because that committee is making decisions. Board meeting minutes. Minutes matter. They are required of corporations, including nonprofits, by law. As a nonprofit, you guys are a corporation. You're incorporated as a domestic nonprofit in the state of Oklahoma, and most of you guys are federally exempt as an exempt organization, a 501 of some sort. Most of you are 501c3s, and that's probably the most prominent federal recognition for our organizations. We have a few other designations. I think there's a 501c7. There's some C13s. C13s are for cemeteries. And the C7s, I think, are like neighborhood watches, things like that. Minutes have to be read and approved at board meetings, and I just can't stress that enough. Those really need to be accurate. How to take meeting minutes without going crazy. Use a template or prepared form. We do have some templates at our office that can be used. Basically, a good template, though, is going to be something that really works for you, and it's going to have to be designed for the way your board operates. If you've got 5 board members or 7 or 11, it's just going to depend on you guys. But what I like to do is under the members, even at our staff meetings, we've got everybody's name on there that's a member of the staff. So it'd be your entire board meeting. And then when you pass that agenda out, you can simply circle everybody that's there, or circle the people that aren't, whatever way works for you. But that way your roll call is really easy. You don't have to write down everybody's name, and then on the template form you can also have actions, approve, not approve, and you can also put in there, if it's an electronic copy, you can put everybody's name on those lines, and then if they approve or not approve, you can circle their name. It makes it real fast, real easy, and then you can just be writing in your notes for the important things about, like the motion that was made. You really need to make sure that you record that specifically. You want to record that motion exactly the way it should have been read. Don't record everything. Focus only on what is decided or assigned. So if the board is making a decision, that's definitely something that you need to record. But if you're talking about, hey, I think we need to turn the temperature up in here because it's really cold, you don't need to record that. So record action items, of course. If you're taking action, that's what you want to record. Avoid personal observations or interpretations. The minutes, you don't need to put opinion in there. For instance, well, Chris voted this way, but I think that he was really leaning this way because he was saying this. You don't need to put personal opinion in there. Don't rewrite or summarize documents. If there is a document that was presented, make sure it's attached to those minutes. So that way you're not trying to paraphrase an actual document that was presented or something like that. But you do want to make sure that you capture those motions as they were read. Duties of the treasurer. Reports on the organization's financial status to the board at each meeting. I think most all of our organizations have some form of report that our treasurers do present. That's one of the things that is really, really important that keeps your community involved with you, is that transparency on finances. That's probably the most important thing that a board can do. I don't care if you're talking about $5 or $50 or $5 million. It's just so important. One of our organizations has even gone to the point that they have this huge whiteboard back behind them. Every transaction and every penny that they've brought into that organization and every penny that's gone out of that organization is written on that board. But it's also, they hand out the reports too. So it's a pretty good idea if you can do that. Some way to be able to provide that information to the public. And which, by the way, Oklahoma Open Meetings Act and the Open Records Act dictates that if somebody asks to see those records, they have by law the right to view those records. They can also ask for copies of it, and by law, you have to provide copies for them. Creating each year's budget along with the nonprofit's chairman or president. Creating a budget is pretty important. I know a lot of times you're saying, well, we're just not big enough to have a budget. Well, yeah, you are. Because if you have an organization, you really need to project what it is that it's going to take to operate this organization. And that's what a budget is. That's just your best guess on what it's going to take to keep the doors open. And that way, you've got that budget there and you see what you're going to need for next year. And if you've had a budget last year, you can pretty much use some historical data there to make your projections for next year. If you were short this last year, you know that you're going to need more for next year. So you want to project that where maybe you didn't project enough for the utilities last year. And you know that you need to be able to put more of a percentage of your fundraising activity dollars toward general fund. And that's one of the things that we also like to recommend, when you do have these fundraisers, if you've got the money, set it aside for fundraisers. Say they start with $500 for a fundraiser. When you have that fundraiser, you have to spend money out of that budget right there. That's all you get. So when you have that activity, and you bring that money in, say you raise $700, and you spent $300 to raise that $700. That's $400 over. That's just a $400 profit margin there, because you want to fill that kitty back up, and always maintain that. That way, you kind of really see where you're at and how much that particular activity brought in, because it didn't bring in $700. It only brought in $400 because you had to spend $300 to get it. So that just gives you a good idea of where you're at and what you need to be doing. Keeping track of charitable gifts or donations made to the company. This is important. If you're a 501c3, if somebody donates more than $250 in a fiscal year, they can write that off on their taxes. So as the treasurer goes, and a lot of ours are secretary treasurers, it's also your responsibility to make sure that they're receipted for that. Treasurers should not sign checks. Why do you think that's kind of important? Exactly. Well, the treasurer's doing the reporting. So if we got $5,000 in the bank, and I'm the one that's reporting it, and I'm the one that signs all the checks, and I tell you every month, hey, we're doing good, we got $5,000 in the bank. Every month I keep telling you that, but yet I took it out last week, and I went down to the casino, and well, I didn't do so well. But I'm doing the reporting. It's probably not a good idea.
When you said treasurers, should you just have one sign or two signs?
Okay, well, now that's a policy set by the board, because the bank, they really don't care if one person signs it or two people sign it. But as a policy for your board, it is a good idea to specify that we want two signatures on checks, any check that goes out more than, say, $250. That way you can kind of maintain a little bit more control about those spending habits. If it's something like the utility bills and stuff like that, you got to pay it anyway. So it's not really that big a deal that you have two people sign, because the bank, honestly, they don't care as long as they have it one signature on there. That's all they're going to go with, even if you have two check lines or two spaces on there anyway. But that's really an internal control policy for you guys. So it's really up to you how you guys want to handle that.
We have board approval.
Do I?
We have board approval.
Right.
We got our committees, they have their own money. they
Right.
spend, or whatever. But anything that's not in that committee, and if I come in, I'm on the committee, I spent $100 on ice for this fundraiser. Okay, out of my own pocket. They get a check from them, so I gotta take it in, turn it into the board approves it, and then I got reimbursed.
Yeah, in best case scenario, what it's talking about there is being reimbursed for an expenditure. And it's usually a good idea to get approval before you ever spend that money from the board. That way, you still stay above board with everything, and the board approves it before that money's expended. Because what happens if you spend, $500 and the board says, no, wait a minute, sorry. You're kind of out of that money. So, but if you got approvals beforehand, you're pretty safe.
Are petty cash funds permissible?
Sure. A lot of organizations can use petty cash funds because a lot of times you have maybe you're doing a yard sale, a community yard sale, and you need to run up to Walmart and get some more poster board. It's a good idea, but you do need to have some policy behind that. How it's got to be checked out and handled. Because the most important thing you guys can do as a board is to maintain transparency with your community. And financial data is something that's really important to everybody. They want to know where that money is spent at, how much it was spent, and how much you brought in. They want to know all that good stuff. And but yeah, petty cash funds are sometimes necessary. But make sure you have good, strong policy behind that too, and you're covered. Duties of a board member. Stays in touch with other board members. This is important, but I think we've talked about quorums too. We've probably talked about this a lot in the past, but say you got 3 county commissioners and they all happen to meet down at the football game on Friday night and they start talking about business. They've reached a quorum with 2 people. They're now breaking the law. They're not supposed to be discussing business and taking action together as a quorum. Now, they can discuss it one-on-one all they want, and as long as they don't have a quorum, they can talk about it all day long because they can't make any decisions. They can't take action on that. But you got to be very careful about that.
They call a special committee or a special meeting, and they go ahead and do it then, if everybody's there.
Well, they
I'm
still,
talking about the board.
no, if they just happen to show up at the same time,
Yeah.
no.
Like they have lunch and all,
Yeah.
most of them shows up and they start talking and say, well, let's go ahead and vote on this.
Yeah.
It's approved.
Can't do it. They have to by law, post that
Don't
meeting.
have to post a meeting. though.
Right. Let's see. Board members also vote on matters that require action during meetings. Like we were talking about earlier, it's your responsibility to vote one way or the other unless you're abstaining for a legitimate reason. Attends to assigned or volunteered duties. That's another thing we talked about. You guys are wearing a lot of different hats. You're all volunteers, and just because you happen to be the vice president, that doesn't mean that's the only thing that you're going to do. It rarely is. There's a lot of work that has to be done. Remains active during discussions by contributing to the information, ideas, debates, plans, and bringing related information to the table. It's your responsibility if you find out some information concerning a contractor that you're going to be voting on or looking at using for some work or something like that. It's your responsibility to make sure that the board is aware of that. Let's see, how are we doing on time? Okay, 7:35, is that what you guys have? Okay. Bylaws. A lot of the things that we've talked about, like the petty cash fund, you don't necessarily have to have those policies in your bylaws. you can create policy that you don't have to go to the trouble of amending bylaws in order to get policy done. Because those bylaws, when you amend those amendments need to go back to the state, and they also need to go to the federal government too. So it's a little bit more tricky to amend bylaws. But it's much easier as an organization to work off day-to-day operations with policy. If you've got a community building, you may have a rental policy. Maybe it's a policy of we're going to waive the rental fee for funeral receptions, things like that. Or, the policy may state that you rent the building for $30 for the day, and that whoever rents it must clean it up. Or you have actually a deposit or cleaning deposit or something. If it's not clean, then they don't get their deposit back. Different things like that, but your policy should be able to take care of those day-to-day operations. The bylaws must be formally adopted by the organization. State law requires the organization to keep a copy on file. If somebody were to ask you for a copy of your bylaws, by law, you must be able to provide that for them. In case of legal questions, the bylaws are used as the guide to what an organization or its board can or cannot do. Once again, your bylaws may not have every contingency plan built into them. You're going to find situations out there where your bylaws are maybe not so clear. That's where, when those situations arise like that, it's a good idea to have that policy as a backup. It tells you how, because your bylaws, that's your governance. That's how you control everything. That is how you govern the board. They can be amended, but like I said, once they are amended, you really don't need to do that every month. Once a year, you do need to review those bylaws and make sure they fit you, because that is the way that you guys deem necessary as to how you're going to govern your organization. So every year, you probably do need to take a look at them and say, hey, are they working for us? Do we need to make any amendments? And if you do make any amendments, you need to go through the proper steps. But your bylaws should also tell you what those steps are. If you're going to amend those, you need to have some sort of a process in place for that the public is aware of. That's who you represent. But once you do amend those, you make those amendments in record. Well, you need to make sure that the state has a copy of those amendments, and if you're a 501c3, the proper offices have that too with IRS. Nonprofits can use policy statements rather than their bylaws to describe daily operating procedures, and that's what we've just been talking about. This allows the organization flexibility in handling daily operating procedures as need arises. If you have emergencies happen, like the water pipes break or something like that, and you've got to get it fixed, maybe you've got petty cash that can take care of that or something like that. So those daily policies, or those just simple operating policies like that on the petty cash fund, can really save you a lot of trouble. Advantages of this arrangement are the bylaws don't need to be amended to make minor changes to daily operations. If you guys want to change the building rental policy and maybe lower the rent or raise the rent a little bit more due to demand, you can change those policies rather quickly with one board meeting, and you don't have to go into all that record keeping and updating with the state and federal authorities. But a written policy document can be amended by a major vote of the board. It's easier than changing bylaws. That's what I just said. So those policies really do need to be written down and really used and vetted, because it'll protect the board a lot of times when you find yourself in a situation where somebody wants to argue a point and say, well, that's not the way you treated them with that. Well, you can just look at the policy and say, well, this is policy. It's not me. This is policy. This is what the board had decided on. And you can always fall back to that, and it's not a personal issue at that point. And then you can possibly take a look at that later on with the entire board if that particular policy happens to present a problem. And no policy is going to be perfect. No bylaws are going to be perfect either. And I want to hand this out to you right here. This is what we're going to be wrapping up with. This is a short exercise on handling conflicts of interest. And we'll read these and then we'll kind of discuss that. Thanks, Chris. Oh, give me one. Thank you. As he's handing these out, I'm going to read this first one for you. But simply says, you are a member of a board of directors. So what should you say to other board members to disclose the fact that you may have the following conflicts of interest? What could the board do to handle the issue responsibly? And I'll read this first one here. You owe money to a lumber company that is one of the 3 bidders on a contract for supplies that comes before the board for a decision. You're on the committee that will eventually make the decision between the 3 bidders. So what should you do as a board member in this situation? Recuse yourself from any votes or decisions that'll need to be made. You could disclose your relationship and disclose that information to them and abstain from any votes or even step off that committee. Okay, the second one here, you have a son who has applied for a job with a company that is providing paid services for your organization. What should you do in this situation? Providing paid services for your organization. They may be, maybe they're a print company that does all your printing. I mean, it's a paid service.
The board who your son is working for this guy. And I don't see any action to be taken.
Right. I mean, it's just a simple disclosure. Hey, you know, he's maybe working for this company. Just wanted to let you know that in case we do have any issues that come up, you know, and, you know, recuse yourself from any voting if any votes are going to be taking place.
If he was not working for the company before you got that company to do what they do.
Right. Right. And it's a matter of disclosing that information to everybody anyway, because you don't want to be seen as maybe using your position of power on that board to try to influence them on hiring your son.
And this says he has applied.
Yeah.
He may not even get the job.
Right. He may not even get the job. But, you know, it may be a good idea to let everybody know, hey, he's applied for work over there. And if that, you know, any problems arise from that, you know, I just want to let you know that. And everything's above board, you know. Let's see, you own a furniture sales business and have offered the organization a 25% discount on a large order of office furniture for the new community building on which the organization has just completed construction. So you own the furniture business and you've offered the organization a 25% discount on a large order of office furniture. How do you think you ought to handle that?
I think you went out and got bids.
Go out and get bids?
And he was the lowest, and the board approved it. I don't see a problem.
As long as you didn't vote on the, let that.
As long as you don't vote.
As long as that person didn't vote, yeah.
Bidding is one of the best things that we can do. We can solicit bids and put that bid package out and have a lot of people bid on things, because we were talking about this earlier today in our meeting. Our organizations are small and they're rural and they're very family oriented. It's hard sometimes to get vendors that are not related to the board. So it makes it a little bit tough to be able to hire those folks. But if you go through the right steps, you obviously can make that happen, because they may be the best qualified person for that job. So, but if you put that out for bid, you know, and the policy is we're going to go with the lowest bidder, and you're not aware of what those bids are to let them know, you know, you're all above board and you should be safe.
If we had a guy that made, was on the board, and made free t-shirts,
Right.
and he offered you our organization a discount for printing these t-shirts out for sale, for fundraisers. Still, yet, yes, we would have to get bids on that to.
It's safer too, and the situation is, what he's talking about is if they have somebody that's related to them or whatever, that has a t-shirt business, and you guys are wanting to buy some t-shirts for marketing or fundraising, whether or not you can just go ahead and give that business to that person. But yeah, it is still a good idea to put that out for bid, to get bids on that, because you may not get any other bids at all. You may get some other bids, just because they're offering a discount doesn't necessarily mean that it's the best bang for your buck, so to speak.
Well, how do you go about asking for a bid?
Well, one of the things that you really need to keep in mind is what it is that you're looking to have accomplished. You need to write down exactly what it is that you want, so that they are all bidding on the exact same thing. You don't want to say, we want a portable storage building, and somebody gives you a quote for, well, we can bring you one out there that's a 10 by 12 and 10-foot walls on it, and we're going to charge you $4,500 for it, and somebody else quotes you one for 20 foot by 15 feet. It's not the same thing. You want to compare apples to apples. So you want to make sure that when you do put that out, maybe it's in the newspaper, now taking bids for, and you've seen the schools do this, now taking bids for, I don't know, milk or what have you, or it could be vehicle maintenance or something like that. So you need to know exactly what it is that you're looking to get out of that. That way everybody's bidding on the exact same thing. See, this last one here, you own a commercial building that has the kind of meeting spaces, parking availability, and office space that the board has been looking for. Since you haven't been able to rent the building for 2 years, you offer the board a 1-year lease for 20% off the price for which you last rented the building. It's a little bit trickier. How do you think we ought to handle that?
I think it'd be best if you didn't do it at all, but at least do the same thing there, see if you could get the same available space or whatever, the very same thing for that reasonable price.
Right.
But I wouldn't offer it, because I would feel comfortable with it. Short time ago, it was brought to our board, my brother has like a remodeling business, he does small repairs on homes and builds homes too. But someone presented to the board that we needed these repairs done to our building and wanted to have him do it. And I stated there that I didn't want the bottom to be a part of the discussion at all because he was not.
Right.
So I personally wouldn't even have offered it probably because I was.
Well, that's one, and she's saying that personally, if it was hers, she wouldn't have even have offered it to the board because of the possibility of looking like a big conflict of interest. That's definitely one way to handle it. Don't do it. What may be some of the other ways to do it?
Well, if the guy that owns the building is on the board, you say?
Yeah.
And he had to excuse himself from the vote, whether approved that run over that building and make sure they had a good sort of contract.
So, do you think recusing yourself is enough in this situation?
Well, but if he gets the bids, like we say, we want to rent a building, they can't find it, and you're offering me a building for 20% discount. If all the board approves of it, I don't see a problem with it.
Right.
As long as he didn't vote and say, or.
Right. And like you said, as long as it's put out for bid, he recuses himself from that and fully discloses the entire details of this particular deal, then you're good with that.
Well, I would think that if the organization was in need of the space, like, right away,
Mhm.
he could make a short-term lease,
Right.
and then they could, decide, or continue to look around, see if there's anything local that they can use, and if not, then I think it would be all right for him to offer, but recuse himself from the voting.
Okay, so to clarify, so if he simply offered that as a short-term solution to a problem,
Right.
and with that stipulation in mind, that this is purely short-term, just to help the board out for the moment, to be able to continue business, and then fully disclose that and the details of that, and then put it out for bid during this time. I see that being very viable, and it gives plenty of time to solicit bids and find, it may be the best deal that they get. And that's his normal business anyway, that's what he does. He's not trying to take advantage of the board by any means, he's not trying to influence anybody. So, we have any more questions or comments?
Always make sure you get a contract from them. You have to have for each one of them. And but specifically, like this building, what is he gonna, if there was upkeep in that